All right, so I've been tracking total number of cases for a number of days, and I've just come to the conclusion that it's impossible to chase cases because the testing is just so inconsistent. So no matter what country you look at, what you look at, it's always going to be apples to oranges. So I started doing a little bit of digging into where I could find primarily hospitalization rates as well as death rates, and I came across this website, www.worldometers.info, or worldometers. That's www.worldometers.info. And they claim to be a website, well, we'll get into it a little bit later, but a website that's founded by essentially data scientists or people that just want to make data more accessible to common folk. So they've got a number of references. I tend to believe in them. They've been sourced in a number of studies, news articles, etc. So I think it's a fairly relevant, reliable, trustworthy source. But I found yesterday, uh, I was looking through, and I did the math before I met with Adam yesterday, and this was leveraging the Johns Hopkins uh, website, and there was an increase of 244 deaths in the or excuse me, uh, today's the 22nd. So on the 20th, there were 244 deaths in the United States reported as of 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, according to Johns Hopkins. Yesterday, March 21st, there was 307, according to Johns Hopkins, for an increase of 63. Now, I jumped on this worldometers.info because I had identified them earlier as having some interesting death rates and trends and visualizations on their website. And I was just going to follow them up because I like some of the visualizations that they had. Well, prior to my meeting with Adam yesterday, they were reporting roughly the same. Off the top of my head, I want to say it was a total of 68, whereas I had calculated 63 new deaths from Johns Hopkins. But I sort of attributed that to either, well, really I attributed it to some sort of offset in hours. So I wasn't sure that this one mentions GMT, Greenwich Mean Time, plus 8, I believe, and they update it at 0000, so at midnight, whereas John Hopkins is real time. So I don't know. I didn't really think too much of it. Thought it was probably, you could attribute it to the offset in hours or the refresh rate or something like that. We're only talking a number of 5 deaths. When I jumped out for my meeting yesterday with Adam, and I regret not having brought this up then, the website had changed and it said there was a total of 40 something deaths. So I was going to get some articles reported here to dive into because it was fresh on top of my mind, but I logged into their website and I thought that was sort of strange, and I was going to just confirm that that number was off because I had seen 63. They had shown 68, but then when I looked at it, it said 40 something. So I was like, hey, let me go back in and double check that. And I'm a little disappointed in myself for not having started the recording earlier because today we're at 419 deaths. According to Johns Hopkins yesterday, we were at 307. So we've seen a significant increase. And when I first pulled this up, um, I was my heart dropped a little bit because I have speculated for a number of days and have sort of been of the mindset that we were following a trajectory similar to that of Italy's, but uh, our death rate had kind of stalled out, and I was feeling somewhat optimistic. Hey, maybe Italy's a little bit of an outlier because of their demographics, and it seems like the death rate isn't going quite as high as I expected. But then I logged in tonight to confirm what I thought was maybe some manipulation of data or an interesting outlier, maybe that I was going to start to track from this website. I saw that we've increased, according to them, by a total of 108 deaths. So that puts us almost exactly on the same trajectory as Italy. And to prove that out, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the same website, but we're going to pull up Italy's data. So let's go ahead, we'll pull this out, we'll drop it down into countries. We're going to pull up Italy. I'm going to scroll down to daily deaths per day. So, of course, the axis is, and this is new deaths. That's fine. So new deaths, 793 yesterday, 627 the day before that. Every day is a significant increase. I do think they're down today. I'll look up the data in just a second. I think they're down into the mid sixes. So that's good, I guess, but you can see this has sort of been staggered up and down. But what I wanted to show was back March 4th, we're at 28. Okay, so this is probably it. So March 5th, we're at 41, 49, a little dip to 36, and then we shoot up to 133. So what are those numbers? 41, 49, 36, and 133. If I look at the last few days here in the United States, look at this, 23, 41, 57, 49, 46, and now tomorrow we're looking at 118. So we're basically today on March 27th, or excuse me, 22nd, where Italy was on March 8th. So that's interesting. Our case rates and sort of the preliminary data that I had looked at showed us being 10 days behind Italy, a week to 10 days. And I think some of that has been communicated out because there was a little bit of a reach, some outreach, I'd say, last week when things, well, I guess it would be 2 weeks ago when things started shutting down. I did start to hear a little bit of conversation about, hey, we're 10 days, 14 days behind Italy. And then all of a sudden, sort of the general feeling, I would say, this aside here in the States, has been, we heard we were 10 days behind Italy. I'm not seeing Italy. What's going on? This is an overreaction. I feel like I've seen a lot more of that sentiment. And I think that model is just off because now it's looking like we're, what did I say with Italy? March 8th. So we're 2 weeks behind Italy, roughly, right now. So that was a little bit of a eye-opener when I logged in. Frankly, I wasn't prepared to get rolling here, but I pulled up those numbers and just wanted to bring that up and try to capture some of the emotion. Let's see, just out of curiosity, with Johns Hopkins. So their number today is 417. I had them at 307 yesterday, and I did grab a screen grab of that. So it's about tracking 107 deaths different. So I'm going to keep an eye on some of this data on a day in, day out basis. I've seen this website shared a number of times, and like I sort of started off, and I'll pull this back up to the top. This does seem like a good website. I do like some of the visualizations that they're leveraging, like I mentioned, being able to start to track, sorry, this website is kind of a mess, but it's got some good data. I've found that tracking deaths and not relative deaths, but death rates has been a better indicator. I'm completely off at cases. I think the data is just too messy. You can't really decipher any meaning out of it. That being said, brings me up to another interesting point, and that is that there was a report out of Japan that the reason that there were no new cases and there have been no reported cases of COVID-19 in China was because they have stopped testing for COVID-19. Let me try to think of a good search term here. COVID-19. Let's try this. Reporting Japan. It's in Italy. So we've got some interesting, effective treatments, but these are old articles. That's fascinating. I would think that this is pretty accurate to the story, and look at the articles we're getting back here. So we're getting China versus Japan's response to COVID, productive drug updates, coronavirus updates from Japan. This is interesting to me because I just wonder how hard I have to look to find it. So I'm going to pull up Twitter here. I know I liked it. Pull up my likes. Actually, I might have shared it. Yeah, here we go. Oh, no, that's not it. That's not it. Sorry, I'm going to put it on pause here while I try to find. Alright, so I found the article that I found. This is PJ Media. It's a report. China stopped testing for COVID-19. That's why there are no new cases. And I think this is interesting. So, world's taking heart from news that China has flattened the curve, reflecting few to no new cases of COVID-19, and that's 3 days of reporting no new cases. So, scroll down a little bit. Report out of Japan by Apple Daily HK says the rosy view from China is a lie. Report by Apple Daily _HK, Japanese news outlet, interviewed Wuhan doctors and confirmed Wuhan has stopped testing. That is why new case equals zero there. They released people in quarantine too early too. So this did get around. You can see Brit Hume shared it out. Hope this isn't true. So the word did go around on Twitter a little bit. I'd never heard of what is it? Apple Daily HK. So I just did a quick Wikipedia search, and it looks like it's the second largest paper out of Hong Kong, a tabloid style kind of journalism. So I don't know what to make of that. I'm not. It does say that it's uncovered numerous political scandals. I don't know. Only thing I can do is dig in a little bit on this. I don't know if it's a reliable source, but I do think it's interesting. I do think it's entirely possible that they've just stopped reporting and testing entirely. So that's something I'm going to keep an eye on, and that was something that was pretty eye-opening to me here today. Anyway, so kind of just dove in here. Really, the initial intention of tonight, or what I wanted to do, was start to really take a look at some of the stories that I've missed over the course of the week. I do want to take a minute and thank everybody who's joined me. There were a lot of last minute text messages and phone calls. Hey, would you mind coming on? A little bit of skepticism. Some people were excited. But I think all the conversations were productive and interesting, and they were all interesting in different ways. So I mean, um, the first conversation this week, David really didn't think that COVID-19 is a real issue. He's pretty skeptical of the whole thing. The one takeaway line that I heard from him, or the one that stuck out with me, to me, was when we were looking through CNN's website, and there was an article that said you could potentially expect 20% unemployment after the coronavirus was done and through. And he made a comment that, hey, you would think that, and he pointed to some advertisement, some clickbait ad that was on the page, and said you would think that would be the most sensationalized thing, that most obese woman in the world lives in your town. But no, we're sensationalizing this to the point where the most outrageous headline was actually coming from CNN as a reputable news article. Whereas at the time, and more so now, I really think 20% is a very real possibility, the way that the economy has just come to a standstill. And that's not just the U.S. economy. That's the EU. That's China. That's Asia. That's the global economy has come to a standstill. Oil prices are low $20 a barrel. Everybody's staying at home. Retail is pretty much completely dead, or brick and mortar retail is completely dead for the time being globally. Um, Restaurants, hospitality is pretty much at a standstill. Airlines are at a standstill. All those folks are going to be hurting significantly in the next few months, and hopefully it's done sooner than later. But anyways, I thought that was a realistic headline, and that was my key takeaway, just to think that things are that sensationalized, and maybe they are. Maybe we'll back at this and we'll see, hey, that was pretty outrageous that we're making those claims. I hope that's the case, but we'll see. So that was an interesting conversation. Then we moved to Chris out in Boulder. Chris had some interesting perspectives, really being in the hospitality industry. I found some of his insights, heartbreaking, some of his stories that he threw out there. I mean, restaurants and basically an entire industry is just laid off, unemployed, and that's a terrible, obviously, state of affairs for all of those individuals, but also from an economic impact as well. Jeff, I thought, was great in breaking down very thoughtful analysis of some of the data out there, and in his interpretation. I appreciate him coming on. I thought that was a fantastic conversation. And then we kind of got a little local here to local town politics, which was fantastic. And there was Joe first, who really sort of started talking about, some of the initial response from the local board of selectmen, how they handled things, what was going on, some of the changes that have been made, sort of the predicament that they were in. But I also appreciated his perspective, being someone in my local demographic. He's in my town. He's about my age. He has a daughter my daughter's age, so fairly similar from that perspective. So it was good to hear his insight and his take on the scenario. Also, engineer. He's a PE, and getting some of his concerns from a logistics perspective, supply chain, how we're going to recover from this, some of the core, things that we take for granted are going to be strained and have a hard time recovering. So that was an interesting angle. Then yesterday was Adam. He's a board of selectmen. He's the chairman of the board of selectmen here in town. I thought that was a fantastic conversation about really the widespread changes that the town has needed to undertake, or had to undertake in the last few days, the last week and a half. Really not having and sailing into uncharted waters, as he was saying, and in the middle of a hurricane. I do have a lot of respect for what that team has done. They're under extreme duress. I know a number of them personally. I worked on the budget committee or volunteered for the budget committee last year, so I've had a lot of personal interaction with a number of those folks. I think they do a fantastic job. It was great to hear their perspective and how they're trying to manage this and really the sense of responsibility they have for the town. I was encouraged to hear the level of communication from New Hampshire, the state, and Chris Sununu, the governor, down to the town level. The fact that there have been conversations with the Attorney General, and there's some conversations about how to get some PPE. Fantastic. That was encouraging. I feel good that our town, my town, and our state, if you're in New Hampshire, is doing as good a job as you could hope given the circumstances. So before I dive into some of the news articles I missed, I do want to thank all those people. It's been fantastic conversation the last 5, 6 days. I'm going to go ahead and send and start to publish this a little bit, promote it a little bit, I guess, on social media. I'm going to toss out a LinkedIn invite just to see if there's anybody out there in my network who might be interested in talking and just chatting through it and having some of these conversations. So that's a recap from last week. A couple of stories here that I missed that I wanted to get to in the last couple of days. Number one, I did see in Vanderbilt in Tennessee. Let's go ahead and see. Is there a D and T? B-I-L. Nah, that doesn't look right. Vanderbilt TN Hospital. Let's see if I can find it. Images. No, that's not going to do it. Let's see. COVID-19. Let's try this. Parking garage. There we go. So Fox News, Fox 13 out of Tampa Bay. I did see some pictures here, and it looked like this might be a pretty low quality picture, but do have some photographic evidence. There is a parking garage that's been converted into overflow hospital intake in Nashville. I realized when I saw this, I've been somewhat desensitized to everything, haven't seen all this data, because I saw it and I was like, oh, that really doesn't look that extreme. And then it's like, yeah, of course, Phil, that's pretty extreme. There's a parking garage being converted into a hospital with beds. I mean, that is a pretty extreme, yeah, I'm not going to watch all that. Pretty extreme situation that's being undertaken there. New York has really become the Wuhan, I've heard it called, of the United States. And I'll go ahead and just look up New York NBC. We'll try to find what their local affiliate is there, NBCNewYork.com. Tri-State sees 174 deaths. Trump deploys National Guard to New York. Cuomo today was speaking. I think he threw out a time range of 5 to 9 months. We can expect these sort of lockdown conditions. I think he was speaking more locally, but I think that realistically that's the number we're looking at. He's requested a number of emergency hospitals be built. I can't remember whether that number is 3 or 5. He's called on the National Guard and the federal government to construct 3 to 5 new hospitals within New York. And before I even speak about that, I'm going to hit the pause button for a couple minutes to get some of my sights straight, and I'll be right back on. Yeah, so I found the easiest way to get these articles was just to do a news search for Cuomo. Because like I said, New York's really being termed the Wuhan of the United States. So Just to give you a sense of that, Governor Cuomo gives New York City 24 hours to address the last of lack of social distancing. Showed yesterday some photographs in New York of some soldiers, some military. I know he's called for National Guard resources, so there's also been rumor of an impending, enforced lockdown. So we'll see what happens there. There has been a shelter-in-place order in New York City. Sounds like folks aren't doing a great job of adhering to that, with him putting a little bit of an ultimatum. Let's see how that evolves in the next couple of days. Just scrolling down here, and I'll talk to some of these. I hadn't seen this yet, but it's calling for more New York streets to be closed off to cars, so really trying to lock down on the number of people out there. Death count, appalled by disrespectful people gathering in parks or the city to reduce density. That's from 8 hours ago. Read this article earlier. Coronavirus TV briefings may have Biden, Sanders worried. So the talk there is he's done such a good job. Could he potentially slot in as the Democratic nominee? I don't know. That sounds kind of outlandish to me, unless there's some extreme event there, which hopefully does not happen. That being said, Biden has been gone for the last few days. There's been some rumors there about him. There's been not much in terms of public communication from his camp, which is interesting at this point of the cycle. So we'll keep on scrolling down here. Decreased crowding. So this is the article I was speaking about. New York coronavirus outbreak could last 4 to 9 months. Cuomo says, and he goes on to say that you can expect more of the same in that time frame. This could take 4 to 9 months. It'll be hard, but it'll be okay. So that's it. That's what I wanted to touch on there. I'm gonna pop up this Twitter feed, BNO Newsroom. I found some of the best data, and this has been the easiest to track here when you're looking at numbers. And while I had this on pause, I pulled up their profile, and we have what, to my knowledge, is the first cancellation from the Summer Olympics that are set to take place in Tokyo this year. So Canadian Olympic Committee says they're not sending athletes to the Olympics should they go on. There has been some conversation as to whether they should be canceled. The most recent conversation I've heard was that yes, they will go on. I've been skeptical to that, but it looks like we've got our first withdrawal there in Canada. Let's just scroll down. We'll just talk about some of these for a little bit. I don't want to get too caught up in numbers and increases. But we do have a lot of updates. Yeah, this is interesting. So Mitt Romney's been ordered to self-quarantine and will not vote after sitting next to Rand Paul, the senator who did indeed test positive for coronavirus. So we have our first coronavirus positive test in the Senate, and Senator Mitt Romney is currently self-quarantining as a result. Mike Pence and his family was tested for the coronavirus, I believe, on Saturday, due to somebody on the coronavirus task force having tested positive. It was reported that there was no close contact between Pence and this individual. He was tested on Saturday. Report came out yesterday that it was today that he has tested negative. German Chancellor Angela Merkel is self-quarantining after a doctor said she had contact with somebody who tested positive. So we're starting to see it reach the upper echelons, potentially, of the political system globally, and folks starting to self-quarantine or being required to quarantine as a result of some exposure. Let's see. So this is a couple days ago. Trump declares major disaster in New York State due to coronavirus. So really some early proof there to New York, and New York City really being the Wuhan of COVID-19 in the States. Scroll down. We've got the shelter in place from Illinois. I think we're at a total of 5 states now with shelter in place orders. Let's see if I can name them all: California, Illinois, Connecticut, New York, and not sure whether it's Pennsylvania or New Jersey. I kind of think it's Pennsylvania, but we're up to 5 states. Um, let's see what else. We have anything else interesting? There have been some positive conversations about a cocktail, including the malaria drug, that came out as being a potential positive. So at BioBreakout has been sharing some potential positive drug combinations that he's seen, showing some results. And I do want to give him a call out at BioBreakout because he's provided some great insight as being a on the beat source out there, and I guess that's the best way I can put him. So he's provided a lot of updates here in the last few days. A lot of them have been over my head from a from a hospital perspective, and from a treatment perspective, but he's been sharing a lot of that information out there to his network, which is great. Gilead has paused access to experimental COVID drug use, or COVID drug access, was the headline on this. The reality is that they're stopping the compassionate use program due to transition to expanded access. So really a positive. He's been an advocate for this drug. Hopefully this is a good development. In Italy, 4,000 medical staff have been infected by coronavirus. At least 18 doctors have died. We've got them listed out here. Of course, that's a terrible, terrible state, but I will call out, just from a demographics perspective, these are older, younger. The youngest on the list is 57. Then it jumps to 63 and above. So terrible news, from a demographics perspective, personal, selfish perspective. I guess it's positive if you want to look at it that way, which of course is always on the back of my mind, and probably everybody's from a selfish perspective. Yeah, a lot of on the shortage of PPE. We've seen that globally. I think the first time really I saw some news on that was on, I guess it was Tuesday's session when I was speaking with Jeff, and we saw that article out of reporting that India has required a stop to export on N95 masks. So really we've seen continued coverage on a shortage of PPE. I think New York was reported, the last I saw, to have just 2 or 3 weeks of supplies. Trump has changed some of or allowed the CDC, I guess, to relax some of the standards. I don't know how that happened politically, but ultimately they've relaxed some of the standards around reusing N95 masks because it's just not practical to throw them away. And not that it's not practical, but they're just short of supplies. So that has been big on the news in the last few days. And Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos have chipped in, as have the big three, to produce ventilators. It's really like a wartime scenario. We've got some major manufacturers pitching in. I say pitching in. I guess they've probably partially been required to. But they're starting to produce some medical equipment to help with the outbreak. One thing that I've thought is interesting, and I've really seen a big takeoff of this today, was is from the right. There's been a big time change of narrative from the onset of the outbreak a week and a half to 2 weeks ago. All right, so thought about it a little bit, and I did cover the right wing side and sort of the narrative change from their perspective, and I thought I should probably spend a little bit of time on a little bit of what's coming out of the left. And from the left, what we've heard is um, a lot of accusations of racism around the virus. So um, Trump, and we discussed this really even early on. I think it was back, what was it, Tuesday was the first time we brought it up, and Trump has had the propensity to call the virus the China virus or the Chinese Wuhan virus. So there's been a lot of that that's continued, as as is frequent in this day and age. There's a lot of bluster pointing that direction from the left side. And I don't see anything again on CNN here, but there certainly were earlier. At least there are on the mobile site. So um, that's that. Now, then I think the last thing. Oh, yeah, this article, I shared this one on Twitter. 12-year-old girl with no underlying health conditions is on a ventilator. I'm hoping some stories. I mean, I hate that that's what it comes down to, but um, feels a little bit like that's what it's going to have to take. People are going to need to see stories like that before they really start to take it seriously, unfortunately. Um, yeah, don't call it social distancing. So that's another one. So coronavirus is racist. Don't call it social distancing. And the WHO had a similar report. It should be called physical distancing. Um, I don't know, because we still need social connectivity and social responsibility more than ever. I guess. I mean, yes, it is technically physical distancing, not social distancing. You're not removed, but we're getting kind of caught up, in my opinion, on kind of some ridiculousness when we're worried about what we're calling it. Like I mentioned earlier this week, MERS. I didn't even know it was Middle East. I don't. I can't. Spanish flu. I've never had an issue with the Spaniards because of the Spanish flu. I don't personally think it's racist to recognize that it came from China or that it originated in China or whatever the situation was. Don't think it's racist, but that's a hot topic of conversation. Um, and it probably is worth mentioning as well. There's been a fairly strong lift in conversation around this disease and some propaganda around it from a Chinese perspective. So let me pull up something on Twitter here. Let me pull it up. Let me pull up somebody that I follow. There was a tweet that they tweeted out. I'm pulling it up here. Let's share it. And I think sometimes it's good just to scroll through some of this stuff because Democrats block action on $1.8 trillion stimulus. So yeah, that's being held up. There was talk about this late last week, and it's being held up right now, which is, I don't know the details about it, but not ideal certainly. that we're having partisan issues. Where are we? March 20th. So I'm way far behind. Yeah, here it is. I'm not going to try to pronounce this name, but I think this is point in case. So somebody, the Lizard King here, this is an individual who has almost 1,800 followers. Florida transplant to the desert, mama advocate, joined April 2012. That's what I know about Lizard King. They tweeted out, this isn't a conspiracy tweet, but I really think COVID-19 has been here in America for a while. Do you guys remember how sick everyone was during the holidays / early January, and how everyone was saying they had the flu and the flu shot didn't work? So that was retweeted by, and again, I'm not going to try to pronounce this name, but spokesperson and Deputy Director General, Information Department, Forest and Foreign Ministry at MFA China. And they provided some additional context. I really think, or I guess they just retweeted that tweet, but the fact that that was retweeted by this blue check mark Chinese spokesman from somebody who's fairly irrelevant, 1,800 followers, little fishy. So we're seeing some real evidence here on some Chinese propaganda pushing this thing back towards the United States. I've seen some Chinese media saying that it originated in the United States. I've also seen some American, I don't know if it's propaganda, but maybe it is. But I guess it doesn't come from the government, but some American media speculation that this is potentially an intentional act of war perpetrated by the Chinese government in the release of the virus. So this is certainly going to result in some tension after this is all said and done. Another thing that'll be interesting to keep an eye on, and I'm sure I'll have some updates in the next few days to weeks. Last thing I wanted to touch on was really looking at this from a personal perspective. I haven't done a very good job of talking about how this has personally impacted me, and at times I've been so caught up on the data that I haven't really taken the time out to discuss sort of my personal impacts, and I think it's important that I do capture some of those. So going back through the week, from a work perspective, so I work in sales for a business applications services company. That's my occupation. And I've seen this past week, I've been as busy from a meeting perspective as I have in the last 6 months. So no shortage of business meetings. People seem to be treating it as business as usual. We've seen and been inundated with cancellations, postponements, from an email perspective. I'm a little curious as to whether it's just, hey, really the word hasn't spread down to the IT department. I'm a little skeptical on whether that capital is going to be really invested on IT projects at this point in time, given the state of the economy and the outlook for the economy in the next 6 months to a year. We'll see. I hope. Hopefully this all passes and this is all a bunch of negativity and a bunch of do it about nothing. Hopefully it does all pass and it's a temporary hold and we reevaluate in a few weeks or maybe even a month and things are okay and we can kind of pick up where we left off. I tend to be pretty bearish on that, but we shall see. So that's been work. A lot of meetings, a lot of busyness. I have a number of meetings upcoming. But that's great. Hopefully that continues. Personally, here at home, we've been homeschooling this week. The school's been closed all week. That's been a challenge, of course. We really started off the week, and at least my mindset was, hey, we need to keep this as close to school as we can, keep things on a schedule, kind of try to follow subjects, really be active, move the kids around, get them in different areas, stimulate them in different ways, just like they would be at school. It didn't take very long for the wheels to fall off of that idea. And I mean, of course, we still want to keep them stimulated, keep them educated, keep them learning. But, kind of the reality is first grade, kindergarten, that's the age my kids are at. They're, you know, in a classroom setting. It's not like they're being instructed one on one for 5 hours a day. I mean, the reality of it is there's a lot of messing around and a lot of wrangling kids that's going on. So towards the end of the week, I think it was probably Tuesday night, it was like, hey, let's reevaluate. And my wife's done a fantastic job putting schedules together and keeping the kids on track and being proactive and printing out materials and keeping on track of or on top of what the teachers have provided for supplemental materials. So she's done a fantastic job of that. But come Tuesday night, it was like, hey, maybe we should be a little more relaxed about this. If we just, and we got an email from the guidance counselors at school that said they kind of gave 3 hour windows, so we're more on 3 hours of true education time, the rest kind of playing around and trying to figure things out. So it's a learning curve for us here at home with the kids as well, trying to help them. Of course, we want to stay on top of their education, don't want to wear them out, but also want to keep them regimented. So that's going to be a struggle that'll continue, I'm sure. Neither one of us knew that we were getting into that a month ago. Alice, my daughter, has been. So there was a night, I think it was Tuesday night as well, where she had a little bit of a breakdown at bedtime and she was crying about missing her friends. And I really felt awful for her because, who knows when this is going to end and she's going to be able to have that face-to-face contact with her friends. And, this is truly that generation-defining moment for these kids. They'll never forget the period of time that they couldn't see their friends and they couldn't get out, and you start to wonder about the long-term impacts that that's going to have on them as they grow up and have careers, and what that's going to do to this generation. So we've got millions and millions of kids out there globally who are going to have this similar experience of everything shut down, living from home. Alice cried too about not being able to go shopping. She was crying, all I want to do is go shopping, and it's like, sorry baby girl, you can't do that. It's just not going to happen. And this is just the first week, so we'll see. Hopefully things of course, hopefully the situation gets better. Maybe people can be a little creative and being able to provide time for people to get out in a safe way. I don't know how that would happen. I'll leave that to the smarter people, but I feel terrible. 10 new cases in New Hampshire today. From yesterday, we were at 55. That's the New Hampshire update. I don't know what else. I think everything else has come up in the conversation over the week. I'm going to leave it at that. I'm sure there's thoughts that I didn't get across. There's been a ton just to process. I think we're all getting used to this new reality. We're all seeing that it's going to be not just a couple of weeks. I think we all feel like this is the new foreseeable future. So my thoughts are really with everybody who's been already negatively affected by this, whether, of course, the illness itself, but also layoffs, furloughs. There's been a record, I believe, climb and new unemployment claims this week. So my heart goes out to all those folks. I'm trying to take care of my local people. When we have ordered out, we've ordered from local restaurants and tried to tip significantly and keep those guys up and running. I really hope that they can make it through this. It's going to be a tough time for all of them. Hopefully the federal bailout does come across, and hopefully it helps them survive this and weather these storms. Of course, I'm concerned for myself and my coworkers and hopefully we can keep it all together. Um, there's always going to be those concerns, underlying things uh, for the foreseeable future. You know, you're always going to kind of wait for the axe to drop, and that's just the reality of business in these times. So, trying to keep the attitude up, trying to look at the positives, trying to keep myself distracted. That's part of why I'm doing this project. It is a good mental health outlet to just think about things and be distracted, and um, hopefully hopefully things take a turn here. It's good to see some positive movement. I think I already mentioned. I think generally the consensus from what I've seen is people are respecting the severity of the situation, and not treading lightly. Social distancing has really taken hold. I feel like people are respecting it for the most part. I've seen a lot of good push on that from celebrities and the like. I have a feeling this coming week we're gonna see some, and this is gonna sound bad. I hope that but I'm just gonna say it. I kind of do hope that we hear some negative reports from some celebrities. I hope that everybody turns out okay, of course, but I think that some people need that eye-opening moment when, hey, somebody that I've heard of has been truly negatively affected by this. All the reports we've heard so far have been, hey, I've tested positive, I'm asymptomatic, I'm chilling out at home, I've self-quarantined, I haven't talked to anybody, so on and so forth. So that's great. I hope that all those people continue to be asymptomatic. But on the flip side, there's a little piece of me that says, hey, it would be really great for general acceptance of these policies, and really the severity of this pandemic if there's a little bit of a negative outcome with somebody. And that feels terrible to say. I don't take that lightly, but that may be in the best interest of us all if somebody could share that sort of insight. So on that negative note, I'm gonna hang it up for the week. I'm gonna put a call out on LinkedIn. Maybe promote this a little bit on social media this week. Hopefully, I've gotten into the groove a little bit, and how to go through these. It's been a learning process. I'm not a natural conversationalist, I don't think, and I'm also not an interviewer or documentarian, so this has been a learning process for me as well. But hopefully, there's value in some of this conversation, and I will talk to you mañana.